ברוך אתה ה' אלוהינו מלך העולם שהכל נהיה בדורו. Okay, so we're very close to our summer session. We have 2 more classes, and then Bezrat Hashem, the host and the speaker are going to Eretz Israel. So I suggest for you to buy tickets or to start making plans, or you'll just see the classes 3 months after they go up on the website. So yeah, you should all follow us. So Esther is going way before me. I'm only going in Elul, but you should definitely make plans. So next class is going to be the last class, and we're going to talk about Mashiach. Bezrat Hashem, we're not going to have to do the class. We're going to just be in Eretz Israel. But if Chas v'Shalom that's not going to happen, then at least we're going to learn how we're going to make it come faster and how we can make it more real in our life. Since we're not going to have any more of the shiurim here, then you can, I brought some of my cards. It has the website on it where I post all the classes. So you can continue following the classes. You can register on the email list and get updates on other classes. Bezrat Hashem. So tonight we're going to talk about a very broad subject, reincarnations. And really to teach about this subject in one class is impossible. So I'm just going to do like an overview, a general overview. What's reincarnations and why we get reincarnated? Who gets reincarnated? What's the point of the reincarnation? And is it good? Is it bad? And what do we have to derive from the fact that we know that there is reincarnations? So, באמת, the subject is very broad. It's almost impossible to cover it in a very short class. And
Listen to the Torah lesson. Sorry, Rabbi, my son, I want you to
אין בעיה. Okay. So, how did it all start? It all started with one neshama, with one soul, the soul of Adam HaRishon. Hashem had a plan. We talked about it in previous classes. And Hashem created this world, created a man, and put a neshama in his body. And this neshama was supposed to do a few things. Neshama is a soul. He was supposed to do a few things in this world, and that's it. And nothing else. All it needed to do, it was Adam HaRishon was created in Erev Shabbat, the Friday evening. All it needed to do is to accept the Shabbat, to say Boi Kala, the Psalm of Tehillim that we say, accept Shabbat, keep the Shabbat, and a few other things, and that's it. That was the whole purpose. But we know the whole story, that came the roommate, Chava, and then came the snake, and we know the whole story. We don't have to repeat it. What happened at that point, the soul of Adam HaRishon was a soul, a very high soul. It wasn't like we're picturing a garden with trees and roses and a man and woman running around. It's not how it is, even though the story is as it happened, but it's talking more of a mystical thing. Gan Eden, heaven, was a mystical place, was a spiritual place. It was more a state of mind, because Adam HaRishon was planted in the heaven, in Gan Eden, but the Midrash explains that only his feet were in this world, but his mind was in a total spiritual world. It even says that he was so tall that he was higher than, the 7 Rekiim, the 7 heavens. So the place of Gan Eden was more of a spiritual place rather than a physical place. And of course the neshama we learn from different sources that the neshama is compared to light, that the neshama, the soul, radiate lights. And soon we're going to talk about it, but we know of 4 spiritual worlds. The world of Atzilut, the world of Bria, the world of Yetzirah, and the world of Asiyah. These are the 4 spiritual worlds, and each one of these spiritual worlds, there's 10 levels. And in each one of these 10 levels, there's numerous amounts of levels. And I'm going to go a little bit more in depth about these worlds. But the highest world is the world of Atzilut. I think in English you say luminary, or the world of illumination, only because the light of Hashem shines there and everything is annulled to this light of Hashem. All the souls come from different levels of these spiritual worlds, and the soul of Adam HaRishon comes from this world of Atzilut. There's a few other souls that we know that come from these worlds, the soul of all the forefathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu. There's different souls that we know that they come from that world. When Adam HaRishon did the first sin, what happened was that he was surrounded just with light. Now there's a concept in Kabbalah, and we talked about it many different times in previous classes, that everything in the spiritual world that manifests into the physical world needs to have a vessel, and there's a light. In order for the light to be contained, it needs a spiritual vessel to hold the light. In the Lashon of Kabbalah, it's called orot vekelim, lights and vessels. The same way in this world, if you look at it, you see that everything in this world, there's some type of a vessel that holds something in it. So it can go to something simple like a cup that holds my water. I can't drink without it. My food is in a plate. I live in a house. My body is in clothes. Everything in this world, you can see the manifestation that there's something that goes in something. This is the concept of lights and vessels. So Adam HaRishon, the body of the first man, Adam HaRishon was the vessel, and inside was this godly light. The second that he did the sin, and he went down from his level, the Arizal calls it that his limbs just fell off. Nashu evarav, neshirat evarim, that the limbs literally fell off him. You have to obviously picture it in a spiritual way, not in a physical way. There's another concept that is explained in Kabbalah, that this is the time when the light was too much for the vessel and the vessel exploded. This is called Shvirat HaKelim, the explosion of the vessels. Why? Because the light was too great, the vessel was damaged, because Adam HaRishon made a sin, he damaged the vessel, the light could not stay in the vessel, and the vessel exploded. This vessel, of course, is a spiritual vessel, it's not a physical vessel, but this spiritual vessel that the Kabbalah is talking about contains 600,000 souls that were built, that altogether built the main soul of Adam HaRishon. Adam HaRishon made a few sins. It's not only that he ate from the apple, that's just the story, but he made a few sins. The three major sins that he did was idol worship, killing, and forbidden relations. These are the three sins that he did. Adam HaRishon, yes. Excuse me?
But there were no other people.
There was his wife.
But who did he kill?
Who did he kill? He brought death to the world. He killed all of us. Adam HaRishon, when he sinned, he brought death to the world. So by the fact of bringing death to the world, every person that dies is kind of Adam's responsibility. There's a place in the Zohar that explains, it's off the subject, but to make the point, there's a place that in the Zohar that explains that when a person passes away, his soul goes to Ma'arat HaMachpelah. That's where all the souls go up to Shamayim from. Ma'arat HaMachpelah is in Hebron, in Eretz Israel. That's where all the forefathers are buried, and Adam HaRishon and Chava are buried there.
It's the opening to that.
Exactly. This is the opening for Bichlal, for the Olam Elyon. All the souls have to go through there, all the tefillot, all our prayers go through there, everything. This is the gate for heaven. So Adam and Chava are buried there, Avraham and Sarah are buried there, Yitzchak and Rivka are buried there, and Yaakov and Leah are buried there. There's a reason why they're buried there, but all the souls that leave this world have to go through Ma'arat HaMachpelah, and the first one they meet is Adam HaRishon. And they come and complain, and they tell him, look, because you had just died. You know, I'm holding you responsible. So Adam HaRishon says, okay, I did only one sin by killing you. Let's see how many sins you did, and then we'll see who has more sins, and then we'll talk about it. So obviously, naturally, the soul says, it's okay, let's keep it this way. I'm saying it in a funny way, but the reality is that Adam HaRishon brought death to the world. He also did idol worship because he didn't listen to God. God himself talked to him face to face and told him, don't eat from the tree of knowledge, only eat from these three, don't do this, don't do that. He didn't listen. He listened to an animal, a serpent. This is idol worship. He didn't listen to God. And he did forbidden relations because once he sinned, he, in our language, we call it he dumped Chava. He didn't want to see her. Because he told her, you made me sin. Because of you, I sinned. So he got very upset, and he, in our language, dumped her. He didn't want to see her. For 130 years, he didn't have any connection to her. And in that 130 years, he was mating with different things, and he failed in forbidden relations. And he did some other things. So anyways, when Adam HaRishon did the first sin, since his soul was built from 600,000 souls, which are the branches of all the souls of all the Jews from all generations, we are just sparks from a soul from that 600,000 souls. So when he did the first sin, all this soul exploded in thousands of pieces, and each piece is a spark, a godly spark, one soul that had to come down to this world, fix the part of that soul's blemish in order to connect all together back into one soul. Which means that all the souls had to come back here round first to fix the sin that Adam HaRishon did. Now, there's different books that actually teach us who were all the reincarnations from Adam HaRishon, who were the reincarnations of Sarah, of Chava, and so forth. Who came to fix which sins. So that's where it all started. It all started, there was one soul, it did one little boo-boo, and now we're all paying for it. Now, in general, there are three types of reincarnations. The first reincarnation is what I just said, that somebody sinned, a soul sinned in a previous life, and it had to come back here to correct it. This is the first type of reincarnation. The second type of reincarnation is that the soul had to come back here to complete its mission. Now the Arizal explains that there are 613 mitzvot, and a soul has to do all 613 mitzvot in all three levels of thought, speech, and action. Machshava, dibur, ve'maaseh. These are three levels or three garments that the soul gets dressed in. And each soul has to do all 613 mitzvot in all these three levels. Thought, speech, and action. Because every mitzvah you can do in your thought, you can do by talking, and you can do the actual act. So the second type of reincarnation is that I just didn't finish my job. I had to come back here. It's a good reincarnation. And the third type of reincarnation is that a soul comes down here to assist somebody else. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהכל נהיה בדורו. The third option is that a soul comes down to this world to assist somebody else. Now, the worst type of reincarnation that somebody came here because he already sinned, then this is what's called the worst type of reincarnation, because I came back here as a punishment, let's call it. It's not a punishment, because if you look at it in a positive way, I actually am getting a second chance. But this level of reincarnation, Arizal says, most likely will sin again. Because he came to fix a sin, there's a great chance he's going to sin in this world again. That's all of us.
All of us?
That's all of us. Okay? We all sin.
They're small.
Yeah. That's the type of reincarnation we are, because we all sin. Nobody can pretend that they're not sinning. The next type of reincarnation, that somebody came because he didn't finish something, the Arizal says most likely will not sin, because he came to continue his journey. So therefore we see some individuals that don't sin. Great sages, great rabbis, even in our generations, we see some individuals that they don't sin. They're in such a high madriga that they don't sin. And these are the types of souls that came down in a reincarnation because they're missing some mitzvot. That could have been us 1,000 years ago, or maybe 2,000 years ago, that we came back here to finish something. The third type of reincarnation is that somebody comes here to assist somebody. It says not only that they're not going to sin, you see right away that they're, individuals that they're basically separated from us. You see that they're not really connected to us. That's why we see many tzaddikim in our generations. In every generation there are tzaddikim, righteous people. Some of them are hidden, some of them are revealed. And these are the souls that actually come down here to assist. But for all three of these categories, there's always exceptions. There are exceptions that I came down here, I'm just saying I and not me, but could be that a person came down here, that he also didn't finish his 630 mitzvot in all three levels, and he sinned with two types. Now it's very important that what you take from this class is take into consideration that what I'm saying is very general. I'm not touching every little thing because we're never going to finish with it. So in every one of the rules that I'm telling you, there's always an exception to the rule. Could be very much a person that came down here that is missing some mitzvot, that he has to do some of the mitzvot in thought, some of the mitzvot in action, some of the mitzvot in speech, and he also did some sins in the previous life. So each one of the exceptions, each one of the rules that are exceptions, because also a tzaddik, there's many tzaddikim that come down to this world because the way it works, and this is something I'm not going to get into at all today, but there are many souls of righteous people, men and women, that did, let's say, just for the sake of the example, 95 perfect, they were 95% perfect. 5% they were missing here and there, but real simple things. They never did any big sin. They never desecrated Shabbat. They never did any forbidden relations. They never talked Lashon Hara. Never did anything big. But they failed in real simple things. Now what happens is, that type of a soul goes up to Shamayim, goes to the heavenly court. They're telling her, Habibi, wow, you got 95 on your test. That's amazing. You're going straight to Gan Eden, no question here. You never did anything real bad. But what happens is, it says about the neshamot, the souls of the tzaddikim, that they constantly go from chayil to chayil. They constantly get elevated. Now what happens when they reach the peak, where they want to go a little bit higher, then those little sins stops the soul from coming to a higher level in Gan Eden. So then the soul has to come down back into this world in a reincarnation, and they have something very minor to fix. Now I'm talking about something very minor. I'm talking about a man, for example, that was literally amazing in his level, but one time he thought the wrong thought while the tefillin was on his head. And according to halacha, you're not allowed to take your mind off the tefillin 1 second. Now 99.9% of all men fail with it every day. But how can you not think? You're praying, suddenly your phone rings, suddenly you're thinking, my business, my kids, you have worries, how can you have 100% concentration on your tefillin? In the olden days, the sages used to wear the talis and the tefillin all day long. They would take the tefillin and the talis off when the sun would go down. But their mind was so holy, they never thought of anything. In our days, we have to have the minimum of the minimum, because you put the tefillin on for 45 minutes when you pray shacharit and your mind is elsewhere. So that's the type of sins that I'm talking about. For 1 second, having the wrong thoughts. Or the example that Arizal says, giving an example of one sage that came back here in a Gilgul, because he didn't have the right kavanah, the right purpose, when he said Amen Yesh Meraba. He didn't concentrate the right way. So when he reached such a high level in Gan Eden and he wanted to ascend to a higher level, they told him, this is where your little sin stops you. You have to come back here. So that's why we see even tzaddikim can come back here in a Gilgul. So in essence, all the souls can come down here in Gilgulim, in reincarnations. And we talked about the souls that sometimes they come down here just to help another person. And this type of Gilgul or reincarnation is broken down into 3 categories. Reincarnation, that the soul gets reincarnated in a new body. Then there's something that is called ibur. Ibur is I don't even know how to translate it. Ibur is something like to be impregnated, which means that there's a soul in the body, but comes a new soul and gets impregnated in the body just to do one mitzvah, and then the soul goes out. And that's why we see that sometimes a regular person, lives his life. One time out of his life, he did this unusual mitzvah. Suddenly he had this special powers. He was able to overcome a certain thing and do a certain mitzvah. One can point and say, probably a soul of a tzaddik got impregnated into his body for 2-3 days or a month and then left. So this is called ibur. Then there's other levels, what is called dibuk, that a soul can get stuck into another soul. There's different other things. We're not going to get too much into that today, because this is more in a negative way, and I'll get to it in a little bit later. Now, one of the reasons of this reincarnation is that our soul has 5 levels. The highest level of our soul is called Yechida. A lower level of the soul is called Chaya. Then comes a lower level of our soul that is called Neshama. Then comes a lower level of the soul that is called Ruach. Then comes a lower level and the lowest level of the soul that is called Nefesh. Now, each one of these levels correspond to one of those spiritual worlds that I talked about. The level of Nefesh, which is considered the lowest of the lowest, corresponds to the world of Asiya. The level that is called Ruach corresponds to the world of Yetzirah. The level that is called Neshama corresponds to the level of Bria, the spiritual world of Bria, and the level of the Nefesh, of the soul that is called Chaya, corresponds to the world of Atzilut, and the part of the soul that is called Yechidah we don't get to it. Very, very few single souls in history reach to the level of Yechidah, and they fix it. These are like what's called a tzaddik gamur, a righteous man, but there's even levels of tzaddikim. There's tzaddik gamur, tzaddik she'eno gamur, tzaddik vetov lo, tzaddik feralo. There's many different levels in the tzaddikim. Very few are in the level of tzaddik gamur, and these are the tzaddikim who reach to the level of Yechidah, which is the highest spiritual level one can reach. This has nothing to do with us. Now, how does it work? When a person gets born, they're giving him for free the level of Nefesh, which is the lowest level in the spiritual structure of the soul. Then the person goes through his first term of his life. If he did everything supposed to how he's supposed to do, when he reaches bar mitzvah or when she reaches bat mitzvah, they're giving that person the level of ruach, which is a present. It's a great achievement. It's a promotion. If that individual led his life with no issues, no sins, no problems, at the age of 20, for men and women, they get the level of neshama, which is very rare, because even teenagers already have sins already. Even if they were born to a religious family, they also have sins. To gain the level of neshama is very, very hard. We mainly operate in the level of nefesh. Now, to reach the level of chaya, to olam ha'atzilut, these are tzaddikim, that has nothing to do with us. We don't even reach to that level. We can hope to maybe reach the level of neshama. And the reason why I'm telling you that is because in the beginning we reached the level of neshama. Somewhere along the line we probably had a sin that we had to come back here. But probably most likely most of us at some point in one type of reincarnation reached the level of neshama. Now what happened is the neshama went up to the heavenly court, but there was a few defects, pugamim, and it had to come back here. Now comes another short explanation. A general explanation is that each one of these levels of the soul have numerous levels in this level. So that I'm not even going to get to because it becomes very confusing. But the thing is that, let's say hypothetically, I lived 500 years ago and I corrected the level of my nefesh. How do I correct it? By doing all the mitzvot, but not doing any sins, doing tshuva for all my sins. And I fixed the level of nefesh. And then I was promoted to the level of ruach. And by the way, you don't know when you get promoted. The only person that will know it is that you feel a massive spiritual change in your life. And sometimes it happens to a lot of people who become religious. They live their life for 5-10 years. Suddenly something changes and they feel they're like in a much higher level. Things come easier. They read one sentence and they get blown away. They keep Shabbat, they feel the pleasure. You reach a certain level that you feel, wait a minute, what's happening? I can tell myself that for 8 years I couldn't stand Shabbat. I kept Shabbat. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't wait for the time to leave. I would look at the clock all the time, when is it over? When is it over? I hated the summer Shabbats because it ends at 9. I did it. I didn't complain, but I didn't like it. Pitom, one day, I was like, wow. Suddenly the Shabbat was a total different thing. Suddenly I was like, wait a minute, wow. I finally get it. Now I see the holiness of this beautiful day. Now it's the complete opposite way. Now I'm like hoping, well, I hope that, I'm waiting for the Shabbat, the summer Shabbats. When it comes already 7, I'm like, oh no, we have 2 hours, I didn't even do anything. So one can feel that he's getting promoted in the spiritual level when he derives pleasure from what he does, when he understands, I'm saying he, but I'm talking also she, there's no difference. Reads a little book and suddenly everything makes sense, everything sinks in, everything, I can say on myself the same thing. In the beginning years when I used to go to yeshiva, I would read the same Gemara over and over and over. Nothing made sense. I would read something, my chavruta would be blown away and I would be like, I don't get anything. And now when I read, sometimes I read one line, I'm like, I cannot believe this wisdom. So in most cases you don't feel when you get promoted. But going back to what I said before, is that imagine a person 1,000 years ago lived in this world, he fixed the level of nefesh, he got elevated to the level of ruach, and then he did some type of a blemish on the level of ruach. He died, went up to the heavenly court, and they told him, listen, the nefesh is corrected, you fixed the nefesh. The nefesh goes now to Gan Eden. The ruach has to come back down here. And I'm not going to go into too many details, but that's the same idea for all the levels. So a person can probably fix his level of nefesh, level of ruach, even reach the level of neshama. Somewhere along the line, there's one blemish on one of the levels, so whatever is blemish has to go down here. So could very much be that right now, any one of us is here the level of ruach, because he already corrected the level of nefesh. The nefesh is already sitting in Gan Eden, and now he's only correcting the level of ruach. And here comes, when it comes a little bit more spooky, is that sometimes in that level of ruach or neshama, 2 souls can be in the same body, and sometimes 3 can be in the same body. So here is getting a little bit more hard to explain, so I'm not going to even get into it, but there are times that there are 2 souls in the same body. In most of the cases, it's sorrow for the soul. The way to kind of see it is that when you see a person that really goes through a lot of hardship in this world, sometimes if that person will really go and lachkor and see exactly what's going on, they might find out that there are 2 souls in the body. One is the original soul, and another one is a picky bag. The soul is riding on the other soul. This can also happen in a very negative way, is that to kind of say in general the concept of reincarnation is that in general the men get reincarnated and the women don't get reincarnated. This is in general. Like I said before, for every rule there's an exception to the rule. In general, most of the reincarnations are men, and the women don't get reincarnated, and the reason for it is that men study Torah. And any man, he can be a man that sins, but if he studies Torah, he cannot walk into Gehenom. He has enough merit that his soul cannot go into Gehenom, which means that the only way for him to fix his sins is only a reincarnation. A woman, on the other hand, that didn't learn Torah, she can go into Gehenom. Gehenom is hell. Get washed off all the sins.
Pure victory.
That's more of the language of Goyim. But hell is not a bad place, by the way.
Is it here?
No, it's not here and not there. It's a spiritual thing.
So,
Some souls, and I'm going to get to in a second, they go through this hell here. But why women don't get, in most cases, don't get reincarnated? Because they don't have the zchut, or the light of learning Torah, so they can go into Gehenom. Gehenom is not a bad place. It's just a place, a washing machine, that washes the sins off the soul. Now, what happens for a woman that, let's say, for the sake of the example, is 70% good, 30% not so good? The soul goes up to Shamayim. There's a whole court going on. They weigh the good, they weigh the bad. She has way more good, but the soul has all these spiritual stains from sins that she did. So they tell her, no problem. You're going for X amount of years into this washing machine. We'll wash off all these stains,
where is it?
spiritual, and then the soul is clean and it goes into Gan Eden. Because you have to understand, it's worse to get reincarnated than to go to Gehenom. Gehenom is much less of a punishment. And again, I don't like we're using the word punishment, but Gehenom is a much less painful process for the soul than get reincarnated. Because to get reincarnated, the soul has to go down through all the spiritual worlds. It has to go through the pregnancy, which is painful for the soul. It has to go through birth, which is painful for the soul. And it has to go through this whole life again. Who wants this? So, being cleansed in Gehenom is much better. It's a better option.
How do they cleanse?
How does it get? Excuse me?
Is it suffering? Or?
In essence, you can call it suffering, but a woman or a man that is overweight and wants to do a diet, not eating cakes for 3 months, that's suffering. But you get a result, a better result. So as hell, yeah, in essence, one can say it is suffering. The soul is not having fun there.
What happens
But-
after that? They get cleansed and they go
Some of the souls, they get cleansed in Gehenom and go right to Gan Eden. That's it. They finish their cleansing. The soul knows for how long it goes to Gehenom. It can go to 100 years, 1,000 years, 2 years. It knows exactly for how long it's going to go and what type of Gehenom. They have to understand there's 7 levels in Gehenom, and we're not going to get into that, but some levels of Gehenom, the soul cannot come in, can even come out. But the simple levels of Gehenom, of hell, the soul gets cleaned and then goes to Gan Eden, and it's a good thing, because what happens is when a soul comes down to this world, and it does a lot of good, but it also does a few things that are bad. What happens is that when a soul is dressed in the body, and the body sins, so there's a stain on the soul. In order for the soul to go into Gan Eden, it's not befitting for the soul to enter Gan Eden with stains on it. Even the soul is embarrassed. The soul feels shame to stand in front of the other souls. So if, let's say, I'm 90% good in this world, and sometimes I lied, and sometimes I gossiped, and sometimes I stole something not too serious. Here in this world, I'm hiding behind my body. So I'm not embarrassed. Imagine I now say gossiped about you. But you don't know, so when I see you, I don't feel anything. But imagine you would know what I told about you. How embarrassing would it be for me? Now you don't see it because we're in bodies. But then the soul goes up to Shamayim, then we see it. The soul feels this embarrassment. Why? Because the sin makes a stain on the soul. So for the soul, in order to get into Gan Eden and to get the reward for its hard work in this world, it needs to be cleansed off. So in most cases, and I'm reiterating by saying that all the rules have exceptions, but in most cases, most of the souls of the men, they get reincarnated, and the souls of the women don't get reincarnated, which is a great ma'ala, it's a virtue, because it's much better to finish the tikkun in Gehenom and leave. But there are times when the woman's soul will come down to the world, and it will come down in many different reasons. One of the reasons is that the soulmate, the husband, is in this world, they bring down the woman, so he will be with her. Sometimes the husband is not worthy, they're not giving him the right wife in this world. That's why you see some men, the wife drives the man insane. He's having a hell of a life, but that's a zivug. But it's not the right shidduch, because the wife is a tzaddiket, she's in Gan Eden, and he wasn't worthy for them to send the wife down. Sometimes the wife comes down to be with the husband. Sometimes the woman also has to lashlim, to complete some of the things. What happens is that the soul of the woman, she gets kind of picky bag. She does a picky bag on another different soul, and sometimes on the husband. In a lot of the cases, the women still get reincarnated. I'm talking about in general right now. But the good news is that most women don't get reincarnated. The thing is that we're all reincarnated. So there's reasons why you came down here. Probably most likely you all came down here to be with your husband. That's probably what happened here. Because the woman is the one who fixes the husband. So their husbands are the ones with the ego, and they think they do everything. But in the reality, the woman does everything. So the woman even sometimes has the merit to come down and to assist her husband to elevate the husband, but the woman really didn't need to come down here. Of course, there's exceptions to everything. We can see there's a few examples about the husband and wife. Sometimes one soul has to come down here and the other half doesn't have to come down, and it manifests into this world that you see somebody that doesn't get married. So sometimes if you see somebody that never got married, not got married and divorced, never get married, could very much be, most likely, that this part of the soul had to come down here, and the other part, the Bashert, is in Gan Eden, and it didn't come down here. That's why that person never got married. So it's another nice sign. But this is not 100%. I'm giving you everything in general. Sometimes women who get reincarnated, it's actually a male soul. Don't worry. But sometimes male souls come down in a woman's body, and that is mainly from the sin of two men being together in previous life. And we see now, even now, recently, they're making a whole geshay out of it. This is a very bad thing, and in previous generations we also had it. We didn't invent the wheel. It always was this problem. A soul of a man that failed,
Now it become legal.
now it's Hashem Yerachem. But we know even in the Torah, even if you look at the story, when the angels went to Sodom to save Lot, it's already talking about that Sodom, that's all they did there. That was their thing. So that's why it's still called till today, Sodom v'Amorah, Sodom and Gomorrah, Maaseh Sodom. Why? Because that's what they sinned, that city. All the problem of Sodom and Gomorrah was immorality. So we see in many places in Torah and Tanakh that they always had it. But a soul that failed, that sinned in that department, in a lot of cases will come down, if there has a lot of mercy on that soul, it will come down in a woman's body. And a woman that can't bear kids, most likely that's the reincarnation. So if you see a woman that can't have kids at all, you can definitely have a good hunch that soul is a male soul. That's why she doesn't have the ability to bear kids. And it's a male soul that sinned in a previous life in Mishkav Zachar, in that issue. And it needs huge merits to be able to get pregnant again, and that's where a female soul will get reincarnated to come to get attached to that body, to be able to help that woman to get pregnant, and then the reincarnated woman soul does her tikkun, and the male soul that's in the woman body does their tikkun, their fixing. So unfortunately, you see in our generation, many women cannot get pregnant. So, but there is always the chance, if the woman really does tshuva, which again, not saying it in any insulting way, but most likely, or could be that there's a male soul in the body, not a female soul, that if that particular woman does such tshuva and corrects the sin, she'll get the merit for a female soul to come and get impregnant in her and give that soul the ability to have kids, and then they both do the tikkun together. back to the women not getting reincarnated and men getting reincarnated, is that most of the women souls that get reincarnated, they come to fix little pieces that they missed. So there is many of us, well, not me, many of women that are an original reincarnation. Doesn't mean that every woman is a male soul. It doesn't mean that every woman that get reincarnated, there's necessarily a problem. But like I told you, you can probably most likely, and I'm not a mekubal to actually point a finger at, but most likely most of the women in our generation, I can say that they come to assist the husband. So you can tap on your back. Now, here comes the big difference between the souls of a righteous person and a soul of a wicked person. Righteous person is not necessarily the pictures that we see on the wall. Soul of a tzaddik is a person, a soul that comes to the heavenly court, veyatzat sodek badin, that he won the case. This is the definition of tzaddik. This is in the definition of Tanya called tzaddik veralo, which who is right in the judgment, aval ralo. He still has a lot of bad in him. He did a lot of sins, but he had 80% good, 20% bad. And the heavenly court decreed that this is a soul of a tzaddik. He has a lot of good. He has enough good to be called the soul of a tzaddik, but he has a little bit of bad that needs to either go to Gehenom, to hell and get washed, or he needs to come in a reincarnation. Now, when a soul of a tzaddik, and again, just that you're not going to get confused in the definition, a soul of a tzaddik is not necessarily the tzaddikim that we know of, is a soul that had majority of good. When that type of soul comes in a reincarnation, it will come into a reincarnation in a physical human body. And that's a good thing, because that soul came to fix something in this world. And this is most of us. And that soul has the opportunity to fix something in this world. We don't know if we have to fix a piece of the nefesh or a piece of the ruach or a piece of the neshama. We don't know. We can guess or we can strive to understand. But the fact that we are in a body means that the neshama is a good neshama. Why am I saying that? Because the souls of the wicked people, they don't get reincarnated in a body. They get reincarnated either in an animal, either in in a tree, or either in an inanimate. Now the Arizal explains in general that the first three types of reincarnation is in a Jewish body. The next three types of reincarnations, they go into a non-Jewish body. That's where the converts are. Converts are real Jews, they just were born in the wrong body. And they converts, people who are non-Jew, and they convert to become Jew. These converts, they're not non-Jews that became Jewish, it's a Jewish soul in a non-Jewish body. And that's usually, by the way, also a very high soul, that the reincarnation was dafka in a non-Jewish body, and the tikkun, the fixing, is going into the Jewish body. But after that level of reincarnation, it already goes down to a much lower level, and then the soul can get reincarnated in an animal. If the soul has a little bit of merits, it will get reincarnated in a kosher animal, in a cow.
Sorry, what did I miss about the animals?
I was saying that there's two types of reincarnation.
Yes.
The good one is a soul of a tzaddik, and again, not tzaddik, the tzaddikim that we know, rather a soul that won the case in Gan Eden, yatzat sodek badin, and they're letting him come down to fix something. That type of soul will come into a human being, like us. Some of the souls, they get reincarnated in a non-Jew, so they can get converted. But the reincarnations like us that was born into a Jewish body, in essence you can say, okay, I'm in a very good place because I only came to fix something small, or I came to assist somebody, or I came to finish my 630 mitzvot. So all of us are in pretty good shape. A lower level is that when it gets reincarnated in a non-Jew, but that's also a very high soul, and the tikkun, the fixing of the soul, is to move from a non-Jewish body into a Jewish body. These are the converts. And that's also a very high level. Then, chas v'shalom, if the soul doesn't have enough merits, then it gets reincarnated in an animal. In the beginning, if the soul has merits, it will get reincarnated in a kosher animal, a cow, a sheep, a lamb, a chicken, a fish. Why? Because then the soul can actually fix the blemish that it caused by the fact that, they will slaughter the cow in a kosher way, and then they're going to eat the meat on a Shabbat table or whatever, and that soul gets elevated. That's why when we eat kosher food, even inanimate, we have to have in mind that maybe in that cow was a reincarnation. And one of the reasons why the kosher slaughtering is so particular is because might be a soul in there. And we don't want to hurt the soul with the shchita, with the slaughtering. Because that soul we don't feel it. We don't feel that. The animal on the physical level doesn't feel that. The soul that gets reincarnated in an animal sees everything, it knows it's in an animal, and it feels the slaughtering. And when we see cows standing in line in the slaughter room, it looks very sad to us. They're waiting for the moment to be slaughtered, because the soul knows how long they're going to be living in that animal. When the soul gets reincarnated in the animal, they're telling that soul, you're going to be in this animal for 1 year. You're going to be in this animal for 3 years. And your salvation, your elevation, is when they're going to slaughter that animal. And if the slaughtering is going to be kosher, then your soul, the nefesh, will be able to leave the animal by the fact that somebody will eat it and say a bracha on that piece of meat. Your soul will get the elevation, and you're free to go. So that's why there's so many particular laws about how we slaughter the animals, because in a lot of the cases there's a soul in there. We see, this is a different concept, but we see that there's a minhag, there's a custom that on Friday we eat fish, and we tend to say Lichvot Shabbat Kodesh, when we eat the fish, Shema, maybe there's a soul of a tzaddik in the fish. And some of the tzaddikim, they come down to this world and they end up in a fish. And the thing is that the difference between fish and any other animal, that all the animals have to be slaughtered, and a fish, mitato kaparato, his death is the kapara. The death is the atonement. So sometimes a tzaddik, and I talked about it in the previous class, sometimes a tzaddik has 99.9 perfect. He has one little thing to fix, so they put him in for, a few weeks in a fish body, a kosher fish. They kill the fish, they put it on the table on Shabbat, everybody eats it, and the neshama of the tzaddik gets its elevation. Doesn't feel any pain because there's no shchita, there's no slaughtering. Yeah. Tzaddik. That's why we eat. That's one of the many reasons why it's halacha to eat fish on Shabbat, and we say Shlichvot Shabbat Kodesh, and we eat it before the meat. It's the first thing we eat, and we separate it from the meat. Everything that we read in the oral Torah is not to make our life hard. There's something mystical behind it. There's a reason why we eat the fish separately. It has nothing to do with the meat. And yes, sometimes the tzaddik will get reincarnated in a fish. There's a reason why. And by us eating it on Shabbat dinner, and we say Birkat Hamazon, and we say Divrei Torah, the tzaddik came and he did his little tikkun. Our worst case is that when a soul has to get reincarnated, it gets reincarnated in an unkosher animal. This is already a very low level. This is souls of Reshaim, of wicked people. I read once somewhere that it's kind of a mekubal a few hundred years ago, kind of hinted which sins go in which animals. Some sins they go in a dog, some sins they go in a donkey, some sins they go in a lizard. So, what sin goes to a dog? Lashon hara. But another sin is when a man or a woman cheat on the husband or wife. Niuf. How do you say it in English? Adultery. When, let's say, a husband goes and cheats on his wife. So that's a very bad sin. The reincarnation will be also in a dog.
So Lashon hara in dog? Excuse me, all the Jewish, I don't know if it cares. That's the biggest thing, especially between Persian countries. They talk about
so that's why we have the opportunity to do tshuva for our sins.
Though it doesn't hurt anybody, it's considered
Lashon hara is a very broad concept, because even if you say positive about somebody, that can also be Lashon hara. You can say, you have to be very careful with Lashon hara.
From God,
Not always.
if you did everything good and you do this, you become, oh my God.
If a person is lucky, then he does tshuva in this world. Could very much be that that a lot of us are back here to fix our Lashon hara. But Lashon hara is one of the worst sins that a lot of people fail in. And Lashon hara is gossip and slander. Lashon hara is a very broad definition. There's also the concept of what's called avak Lashon hara. It's like, it's not really Lashon hara, but it's like kind of Lashon hara. And this is not a shiur about Lashon hara, but Lashon hara is one of the bad ones.
You're going to have another class about Lashon hara before you leave.
Maybe we'll do. And I had one in Hebrew a few months ago. Maybe we'll do subtitles.
And if the dog comes to my house, is it any connection with me?
Sometimes, yeah.
And we love him.
If you love him,
Yeah, the dog.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes a neshama will fall into it. Look, you have to understand something, that you're not going to go home now freaking out. Imagine you...
I can see him.
yeah,
Somebody
I understand what you're saying, but I'll give you an example that you're not going to go home all traumatized. A person can live his life and do mitzvot and keep Shabbat and eat kosher and give charity and learn Torah and do many, many things. He goes up to Shamayim. They tell him, Adoni, you were 70% good. We congratulate you for all the good you did, but you have 30% bad. So you have a few options. You have an option to go into Gan Eden, but you only get 70%. For the 30% you messed up, you're not getting. The soul says, no, I'm not negotiating on my 30%. They'll say, no problem. You can either go to Gan Eden, no, I want to fix my 30%. They tell him, no problem. You're going to get reincarnated, but you're only going to get reincarnated to fix what you blemished. Because you fixed. Your nefesh is fixed. Your nefesh goes to Gan Eden. A piece of the neshama is fixed. That goes to Gan Eden. But the 30% that you sinned was, let's say, Lashon hara, and stealing, and... no, that's bad. And whatever. And lying. Okay? So the neshama, the piece that has the blemish on, will get reincarnated 2 years in a dog. Right? Then the dogs die, that piece goes up to where it goes to. Then the other piece comes down, it will come into a tree. Then another piece will come down here. Each piece, the soul is built from many, many components.
So one whole thing doesn't come to
Not the whole
get
thing.
fixed?
Yeah, one piece. How does it correct it? First of all, just by being in the dog, it's suffering for the soul, and the suffering washes off the blemish. That's the basic. Second of all, the dog can be a guard dog to a Jewish home, and he does a service. The dog can bring joy to the kids. The dog can be a companion to somebody and fills in a void in his life. The dog can do so many things. The dog can be a guide to a blind person. So any animal can actually serve its master.
Should the dog in Jewish family?
Wait, what?
Should the dog be in Jewish family?
Better not to. Better not to have a dog. She's asking if to have a dog. Better not to have a dog in the house.
Why not? We'll say Jewish,
It's
maybe
not good.
Maybe, but maybe not.
It's not
Maybe it's
good.
Jewish soul.
Maybe, but maybe not.
So why people like you don't, Rabbi, they don't like their dogs? Why?
It's not.
There's many. I love dogs. I always had dogs when I grew up, but now I'm religious and I don't have dogs in my house. The only time that the Torah will allow you to have a dog is if it needs to guide a blind person, or if you have a farm and you have all sorts of animals that come to attack, you need a dog to guard it.
Or it's in the backyard. If
Yeah.
you have a house,
Or
in the backyard, but not inside.
yeah, or for example in the army, or if you live next to a dangerous place. If in Israel they live in all sorts of dangerous places, you need a dog. This is where the Torah will allow you to have a dog. It's better not to have it in the house. It's better not to say brachot next to it. It's better not to do mitzvot next to it. The only reason is, and this is no offense to the dogs, I love dogs too, But the essence, the chayut, the life that brings life to any unkosher animal is the opposite of holiness. It's the sitra acha, it's tzuma. So you bring this impurity into your house.
What shall we do now?
What should you do? Then if you have a backyard, then you keep it in the backyard.
Make a room for him.
So,
He will die because he got used to it.
so look, if you ask my honest opinion, better not to have it. But if at this point you're already so connected to the dog and the kids are connected and it's part of the family, then first of all you have to be very careful that every time you touch it, right away you have to do netilat yadayim. You cannot eat, 3 times with a cup.
And bracha?
No, just water. You cannot say a bracha after you touch the dog. You cannot eat after you touch the dog. You cannot do kiddush next to the dog. There's a lot of things you have to know. If you pray in the house, you can't pray next to the dog. It's nothing against the dogs. I love dogs. I grew up with animals. I'm an animal lover. But when it comes to kedusha, there's nothing against. It's nothing against the animals. But every being in this world gets a life force. It's called chayut from 3 different places. Either they get it from kedusha, holiness. Either they get it from tuma, the other side of holiness. Or they get it from klipat noga, which is not here and not here. These are kosher animals, trees that you're allowed to eat the fruit from, stuff like that. That they're not here and not here. Any tree that you're not allowed to eat from it gets its chayut from tuma. Any animal that is not kosher for us gets its chayut from tuma. So any food that we're not allowed to touch, inanimate, gets its chayut, its force from tuma. That's why you're not allowed. Why do you think we're not allowed to eat unkosher animals? Not because Hashem doesn't want us to eat, a horse or a pig, chas v'shalom. Because the nitzot eloki, the godly spark that enlivens that particular animal, comes from the other side of holiness, and it will affect negatively our soul if we come into contact with it. So if you have a dog in your house, if you want to go to do it 100%, then best not to have the dog in the house. If, like I said, you're already connected to the dog, the kids are connected, it's part of the family. So if you have a backyard, put it in the backyard. And if not, then go and read all the little rules that you have to do when the dog is in the house. I'm already telling you cannot say brachot next to the dog. Any bracha, even shakol niya bidvaro. Not to talk about kiddush, not to talk about praying, mamash, praying in the house. Every time you touch an unkosher animal, you finish the petting, you go and you wash your hands. If you touched it, don't touch your eyes, don't touch your nose, don't touch your mouth, don't touch your ears, don't touch any of the holes of the body. So this is not only dog, it's cats too, it's any unkosher animal.
So when they touch your feet, when you go to any...
No, if they touch your feet, it's fine. You'd have to touch with your hand.
And then 3 times wash it.
Yeah. Now if you're playing with a dog, you don't have to every minute go and wash your hands. Play with the dog for half an hour and then go and wash your hands. Now, I want to move on because it's not a class about dogs, but the thing... No problem. The thing is that you have to know it in all different animals. Now again, there's in halacha there's always exceptions when you're allowed to have a certain animal. Certain animals, there's no benefit from them, better not to have them at all. I'll give you an example. Horses, it's not a kosher animal.
It's not kosher, or is it because the shechita?
Has nothing to do with the shechita.
Oh, because a giraffe is a kosher.
I don't know anyone that has giraffes in their homes.
But I mean, it's because you don't know where to shechit.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah, giraffe is kosher, by the way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of animals that are kosher that we don't eat.
Yeah.
But-
But I don't know about camel and horse.
Camel and horse are not kosher.
Not kosher.
But this is exactly what I was saying. kosher. A kosher tree doesn't mean that you eat the tree, but it's tree that you can eat the fruit from it. Orange, lemon, apple, so forth. Any tree that is not edible, and it can be also a tree that has edible fruits, but it's in the 3 years, which is called orla. This is also not kosher. That's also, you're not allowed to eat it. Orla, just that you are, because I see you making a face of you don't understand. Any tree that bears fruit, the first 3 years you're not allowed to eat the fruit.
When you buy it from nursery, 3 years, you know.
Excuse me?
When you buy the fruit tree for 3
Yeah,
years, don't eat
even if it's in your backyard.
It's not in Israel.
It's רק בישראל, לא?
Yeah, בישראל, of course. No, no.
Here it is not applied.
Excuse me?
This rule is not applied to here. Just who is
Yeah, in Israel, I'm talking
in
about.
America. Oh.
Yeah. In Israel, there's many different laws because there's, okay, we're not even getting into that. But there are trees that they have fruit and they're not edible. You're not allowed to eat it. So when I'm saying a kosher tree, it's not that it has a OU on the tree. It's a tree that has fruit that you're allowed to eat. I call them, for the sake of the example, a kosher tree. So it could be a reincarnation in a kosher tree. Because a piece, a nitzotz of the soul can be in the fruit, and you take the fruit, and you open the peel, and you say a bracha, and you elevate the spark to godliness. On the other hand, the tree can, and here comes in a not kosher tree, I mean a tree that doesn't have fruit, then how would be the tikkun for the soul? Is that you cut the tree down, and you build Aron Kodesh, an ark in the synagogue. Or you build, in the Sefer Torah, there's the handles, it's made out of tree, out of wood. There's many things that you see in that are made out of wood, and a soul can get reincarnated in a tree. The tree will derive some type of a benefit, or will be elevated to Kedusha. So it can be even a table that a person sits and study Torah on it. And it can be anything that will be transformed into Kedusha, some to holiness. So that's why also in reincarnation in a tree, there's also a good benefit thing into it.
I thought I saw on the website or something. Didn't you say that you can only get reincarnated in a person 3 times? Did I hear that right?
In general, yeah. 3 times in a person, then 3 times in a not Jewish person, 3 times into a...
Okay.
But like I said before, there's always exceptions to the rules, because in general the Arizal also says there's only 3 cycles. But sometimes there are situations that the soul has a lot of merits, and Hashem will reincarnate it over and over and over and over, and without any stops. And I always say the same story, because this is, I believe, a living proof how Hashem does it. I'm sorry I'm sidetracking, but I want to emphasize that point. 2 years ago, my grandmother passed away. And she passed away, she was 92 years old. And she's a Holocaust survivor, and she's a very special woman, Mamash Tzadeket. Now, before she died, excuse me?
What is her name?
Rachel.
Rachel מה?
מה זאת אומרת מה?
What's her last name?
Her last name? The maiden name is Rosenbaum. אין לזה שייכות. Her name is Rachel.
She was in the Holocaust, you say, I like to know.
Oh, okay. Her name is Rita Rachel, and her maiden name was Rosenbaum. Before she got married, she was Wahlberg. They lived in Berlin. Alea Shalom Tzadika. Actually, if you remember, I think 7 weeks ago we had a class here about the power of modesty. My mom was here and my daughter was here, and that was her yahrzeit, and we dedicated the shiur to her yahrzeit. So, may she rest in peace. She was mamash tzadeket, and she always told me, whenever you have a daughter, maybe my name is Rachel, maybe you can name her Rachel after me. And I was like, okay, Bezrat Hashem, I would one day have a daughter, and okay. So 2 years ago, when she was 92 years old, she passed away, and my wife was pregnant. And my wife was already very, very late into her pregnancy, and my grandmother died. My mom was with us because she came to help with my wife with the pregnancy, but because her mother was on her deathbed, she flew to Australia, and she sat next to my grandmother, and then my grandmother passed away. My mom got up from Shiva on Friday afternoon. And my daughter was born Motzei Shabbat. Now, that Motzei Shabbat was Lag BaOmer, the Yom Hilula of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That's when my daughter was born. Now, my grandmother passed away a week before, and my mother got up from Shiva Friday afternoon. When on Motzei Shabbat, I had a very big lecture scheduled for like 2-3 months before that. It was a very big lecture. It was Lag BaOmer. Somebody booked me for a big lecture. And I told the man, listen, my wife is around the due date. There's a good chance that my wife will go to labor on that specific day. And if she does, then you have to expect a cancellation call. He's like, no problem. I'm going to book a backup speaker. Don't worry. Sure enough, Saturday morning, my wife starts getting into labor. And in my mind, one side of my mind, I'm like, what am I going to do now with this lecture? The other side of my mind, I'm telling my wife, can you hold 12 hours that it will be like BaOmer, that we'll get a good day? Sure enough, my wife holds. Comes Motzei Shabbat, my wife is already like in a very advanced labor. And I tell my wife, should I go? Should I not? What should I do? Now my wife is tzadikah. She says, of course go. What's the question? What, you're going to now affect 200-300 people? You're going to inspire them? Of course go. So, I'm like, Hashem told Avraham Avinu, anything that Sarah tells you, listen to her. So I said, my wife tells me to go, I'll go. So just to be 100% sure, I call my rabbi and I tell him, this is the situation. He's like, are you out of your mind? Of course you stay. Who leaves his wife? Are you out of your mind? Meshuga. Call the person, tell him you can't go, your wife is in labor, and you sit next to your wife. Now my wife likes giving birth at home. She doesn't like going to hospitals. So she's in the other room, in our bedroom, giving birth. And my rabbi tells me, listen, it's Lag BaOmer, the minhag that we sit and learn Tehillim while the wife is in labor, the husband reads Tehillim. This is the minhag. My rabbi tells me, listen, it's Lag BaOmer, study Zohar. Don't read Tehillim, study Zohar. Okay. So I open randomly the Zohar, and I'm reading, and then I get to a part that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is talking about reincarnations. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says that sometimes a soul would leave the body, and Hashem loves the soul so much that He doesn't want the soul to go through any hardship, because when the soul leaves the body, and I'm going to get to it in a minute, the process that the soul has to go through, and the first thing that the soul has to go through is something that is called chibut hakever, which means that the soul has to get patched for all the klipot to be removed. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says in the Zohar that sometimes a soul is so, Hashem loves that soul so much that He right away reincarnates it into another body. The soul doesn't even go out. Because the first 7 days in the Shiva, nothing moves. The nefesh is next to the body. The 7 days of the Shiva, the nefesh is going backwards and forth from the kever, from the grave to the home, to the grave to the home. That's one of the reasons why we sit Shiva. So the first 7 days, the nefesh doesn't move. It's in this world. It doesn't even really leave the body. It's still connected to the body. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says that sometimes Hashem loves the soul so much, He takes the soul and right away reincarnates it into another body. And sure enough, my mom gets up from Shiva, Erev Shabbat. The whole Shabbat, there's no dinim, there's no Gehenom, there's no nothing. Gehenom is locked. All the souls, even the souls, anyone who gets buried after 5 hours into Friday, there's no chibut hakever. We're going to talk about it in a minute. I'll talk about it in a second. So my mom got up from Shiva Erev Shabbat. Motzei Shabbat, my daughter gets born, and I'm reading the Zohar, how Hashem takes the soul and right away puts it into another body. And my daughter's name is she's named after her. She's Rachel, and that daughter is 100% my grandmother. It's my grandmother. She looks like her, she acts like her, everything is the same, and she got her name. And she got to merit what? To get to be born on a very special day, that the lights, if you would see the godly light that shines in the universe on Lag BaOmer, you would faint just from seeing this light. That's the day that she came down back into our body. And where did she get born? To a religious family. If a neshama gets born into a religious family, most likely she will not sin, because they're going to feed her kosher food. They're going to teach her to keep Shabbat from early ages. They're going to send her to a religious school. She's going to go in a path that there's very small chances that that soul will sin. Because the parents, you know, when I was born in a secular family, so I went to a secular school. I was fed not kosher food. I was taught not to keep Shabbat, so I'm already all messed up. But a soul that comes down to a religious family, it's already like on a path, don't worry, you're good. You probably have a little thing to fix.
So a soul that doesn't, then what does that mean?
He has a lot to fix.
Really?
So when we are born, it doesn't mean that it's bad, because the Baalei Tshuva are in a much higher level. That I can tell you already. But when a soul gets born,
It's not like it's kind of
everything in this world is upside down.
No, but you said on the one hand, if you got into, if the soul went into a religious family, you're gonna probably keep
Most likely, remember I said in the beginning that there's 3 levels of the reincarnation. One is that it came to fix something, and most likely it will sin again. The second one is that it came just to complete something it didn't complete in a previous life, and most likely it will be positioned in a place that it's not going to sin. So if you remember in the beginning, and then the third one comes to assist other people. So could very much be that the soul of my grandmother just had to correct a few things. So Hashem said, well, I'm going to take her up here, I'm going to wait, I'm going to torture the soul, let me put it back into her body, into a little girl that goes into a religious family. From the first day of her life, she's going to eat kosher food. She's not going to have problem with kosher. From the first day of her life, she's going to keep Shabbat. She's not going to have kosher problem with Shabbat. She's going to be educated according to the Torah. Most likely, she will not sin. And these are the types of souls that just have to correct. They didn't complete everything. So, I'm sorry I sidetracked, but I told this whole story to say that yes, sometimes souls, and this is backed up. This is where Rabbi Shimon from the Zohar talking about it. Sometimes souls will come here over and over and over and over because Hashem loves them, because they have so many merits that Hashem says, I don't want you to go to Chas v'Shalom Gehenom now. I don't want now to bring you even to the heavenly court, because I don't want any bad thing to be shown. I want you to come here perfect, 100%. So that soul will get constantly reincarnated, and it's a good thing because it comes and it achieves things. So could be very much that a lot of us, yes, we have a few sins that we have to correct, but could very much be that we came here to complete 10 mitzvot that we missed in previous reincarnation. 2 in thought, 3 in speech, and 7 or 5 in action. And all the rest is a bonus.